Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live webinar for our Certificate in Natural Cosmetic Preservation. My name's Lorraine. I'm the Director of Formula Botanica, and I'm guessing you guys have probably seen me before. I'm joined here tonight with two of my colleagues. We've got Elham here, who I'm just going to show on screen. There you go. Who's waving
Hello,
here
everybody.
in the UK. Oh. Do you want to say hello to me?
Hi.
Excellent. So tonight is our live Q&A webinar for your Natural Cosmetic Preservation course, where you get to ask us questions and we get to have a chat with you. So before we get started, because we're still waiting for a few other people to turn up, do you want to type in the chat box what your name is and which country you're in, so we get a feeling for who's on the webinar tonight? Because it would be really great to hear from you guys, because it's basically going to be a chat with you tonight. So the more you talk to us, the more information you'll get out of us, which is exciting. Do you want to say something, Elham?
Hello, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Please excuse my sore throat and my voice, but I'm quite happy to be here with you, and I hope we can have a nice engagement and a lot of questions from your part, and
Yes.
hope to send you home with a good feel.
Absolutely. Poor Elham has a bit of a sore throat tonight, so we'll go easy on her, and hopefully we won't have to make her talk too much. I mean, we're scheduled to talk for about an hour and a half, but we'll see how many questions we get and exactly what you guys want to hear. I've got Shelley Ann on in Maryland, in the USA. Hi. And we've got Alexandra, who I think enrolled with us in the last couple of days. So welcome to Formula Botanica, Alexandra. Got Jane in Canada. It's great to see you here, and Alexia in Malta. So lots of familiar names and faces, which is very exciting. Okay, right. So we've got our Q&A box as usual, which should be in the right-hand. I really need to learn what side of the screen this is for you guys. There should be a little question mark that you can click on, and you can ask questions there, and I'll be monitoring them, and I'm going to be asking them of Elham as we go through the webinar. So anything you want to know, just type it in there. Anything relating to the course, at least, put those questions to Elham and have a good chat about them. We've got Nellie in Denver, Colorado. Great to see you here, Nellie. I know we've got some questions from you as well on the list, so that's great. There will be a replay, and it will be embedded in your course materials as of tomorrow, hopefully, if I can get my act together and get it in there. There will also be a transcript of this webinar. So if you've been through the course materials already, you've seen that there's a transcript from the last 3 live webinars that we did, which we've turned into a document in itself, and it's a fantastic little document. So make sure that you look at that, because it's got all the questions in there that we've ever been asked from students on this course. So we'll be adding all of the questions tonight in there over the coming weeks as well, and we've got someone lined up ready to type that all up for us, which is fantastic. So what I'm going to do is, we've received some questions already, which people have submitted through the question form in the course itself. So I'm going to run through those first, and then if anything else crops up that you want to know about, type it in the Q&A box, and we'll go through those after we've been through the list of questions that we've already received. So let me open up my file, and I'll bring up the first one, which is from Emily. And Emily says, I noticed some soaps I make from melt and pour with the addition of essential oils begin to sweat oils after about a month. What causes this? And I didn't include any preservatives in my soap making. Now, I am no saponifier, as Elham knows, and I'm not sure if this is entirely related to preservation, but you're going to tell me now, aren't you, Elham?
Well, that's a phenomenon with melt and pour. It depends. I'm not sure how you have packed them, but you cannot treat melt and pour like a normal soap, a real saponified soap. Melt and pour has high contents of glycerin. Any transparent soap has high contents of glycerin, some 40%, and absorbs humidity. So you cannot leave that on its own. You have to wrap it in something like shrink wrap, like freezer paper, and then that prohibits sweating. That has nothing to do with contamination. Okay. But you have to pack it. It's not like the real normal saponified soap. That's the problem. There was a question at the end of this question was something like adding food and herbs. If
Yeah.
you are adding something to your melt and pour soap, you should be really sure that it's really, really dry. It shouldn't have
Okay.
any humidity.
Yeah.
But the
And
sweating
that
has
goes
nothing to do
obviously
with
for
contamination.
And that obviously goes for most infusions and products that you produce. When you're adding botanical matter to it, you want it to be as dry and as moisture free as possible, which will obviously prohibit microbial growth. Because that was indeed the other question. If I add food grade items such as grated citrus peel or coffee beans, adzuki beans, etc., into my melt and pour soap recipes, do I need preservatives? So would you add a preservative to that, Elham?
Actually not, because the water content is too low, but any additive you're adding to the soap should be really dry, had
Okay.
no humidity at all.
All right. Let me move on to the next one, which was also from Emily. She says, if I avoid preservatives in body balms and lotions that are anhydrous, am I still compliant? And I suppose that depends on where you are in the world, because obviously the regulations differ. I mean, here in the EU, they're very strict on water-based products or products that come into contact with water. But if you have an anhydrous product and you don't have a preservative in it, are you breaking the law?
Actually not, but as Lorraine mentioned, it depends on how the product is going to be applied, because the product, it's not important that the product leaves your facility safe and uncontaminated. It should remain uncontaminated during its whole shelf life and during the normal or reasonable application mode. So if you are sure that the packaging or the product is so designed that your customer may add some water to it, like a peeling product in a big white mouth jar. It's certain that the customer uses it in the shower or in the bathroom and applies the product with wet finger or wet hand. Water is added somehow to the product. Then you have to add some preservative to it. And then if something, as long as nothing happens, you are complying. But if something happens to the product and your customer sues you or has any claims, then you are not complying. And we all of us want to avoid that. So it
Yeah.
really depends on the application mode and on the packaging.
Okay. Okay. And then moving on from that, there was a fairly similar question. So, do oil-based products require preservatives? And Emily's talking specifically about lotions, so anhydrous sort of runny creams, I suppose. Would you add a preservative to that?
The same, if depends on the packaging. If it's a bottle with a probably with a spray head or with a lotion head, then you know that your customer, that there's no chance or little chance that your customer adds some contamination to the product. As long as you have good GMP, your bottles are not contaminated, your raw material is not contaminated, and you know that the product is leaving your facility safe and non-contaminated, then the chances that the product becomes contaminated is low. If the packaging is
Yeah.
in a way that it's possible that water is applied to the product, then probably you need to add a preservative or a preservative blend. The best way is to test your product under realistic um, application yourself till at least one bottle is ended, or at least one bottle is applied to the half, so you can figure out how much water are you adding to the product during application, or give it to a friend, give it to your mom, and ask them to really hardcore test the product and not try to be very hygienic with that product the way you assume a normal consumer would treat the product.
Yeah. Absolutely, and this is something that we talk about in our certificate in cosmetic stability testing as well, which we launched at the end of last year. And Elham basically says in that as well, be ruthless with your product, treat it the worst you possibly can, spit in it, put your dish rag in it, just make it as disgusting as you can and see how it holds up. Now, I think rather than just continuing with the with the questions there, I had a question, because I know that you've been quite interested in cleansing balms over the last couple of months, since that's something that we've been talking about. And that seems to be a real trend in the industry at the moment. People are making lots of facial balms, but also cleansing balms. Now, how do you think that holds up in terms of anhydrous products having wet fingers put in them? And because all of these cleansing balms that you see that people sell are in wide neck jars, so customers are just, sticking their wet hands in there. What do you think of that, Elham?
Well, frankly, I don't think that these products would remain if there is no preservative added to those wide mouth jars. The product wouldn't remain stable and uncontaminated. If you have a 30 milliliter balm, then it would be consumed in a couple of weeks. But if you have a 100 milliliter balm or a 200 milliliter balm, then it's possible that the consumer applies the balm during at least half a year or probably 1 year, and it's no way to prohibit any contamination. That is the main reason why we are not going to teach making those cleansing balms. The best way to pack these balms is applying a tube, because you can press the product out of the tube, and there is no way that the consumer can contaminate the product. But having those tubes, you need at least the smallest packaging machine is around about 1,500 euros, and it's for artisan balm cream maker. It's a huge investigation. Oh, help me. Investment, exactly. Investment. So it's. I would recommend, if somebody is going to make those balms, then they should invest in a tube making machine, tube sealing machine. So that's the best way to apply these products without any contamination.
Okay, so there you have it. It's all about the packaging. If your customer can't get to the product, then it won't be an issue with an anhydrous product anyway. But the moment they can access it, you have to really think about how you're going to package it. Okay, so moving on to the next question I've got here from Emily, and unfortunately Emily isn't with us tonight, but I hope you get to watch the replay, Emily. She says, if I provide clients with base ingredients and recipes, let's forget the recipes for a minute, but if I provide clients with like a base, do the same compliance requirements apply as for cosmetic packaged items? So I presume what Emily's saying here is maybe she's selling sort of base creams that people can maybe tweak at home by adding essential oils to them. Do you then also have to comply with cosmetic regulations, particularly in terms of preservation, since that's what we're talking about tonight?
Definitely, yeah. Even if you are making, if you are selling a kind of clay mask and you have a dried mask and some hydrosol or some liquid to be blended with it, your liquid and your dried mask should comply. So your mask, your powder should be free of contamination. You don't need to add any preservative to it if it is already free of contamination. But your liquid, everything that needs a preservative and could be contaminated, should be preserved, and everything that leaves your facility should comply with the legislation, with your local legislation, wherever you are or wherever you are going to put the product on the market. Certainly.
Yeah, so basically even selling a base will be treated as a cosmetic, so you still always have to comply with the law. Don't think you're ever going to get around that. I see quite a few new people have joined us, so if you guys want to type in the chat box what your name is and where you are in the world, it would be great to hear from you and hear exactly where you are and how you're enjoying your courses. And in the meantime, I'm going to read out another question. Let's see. If my products are designed for homemade use within 3 months, are preservatives required? And the same question for 1 or 2 months. So I guess, say you're making...
If your product if your product contains water, then they need a preservative. Yes, even if it's for 1 month. You don't know how long your customer is going to keep that product first. You don't know how your customer is going to treat that product. the product should be safe as it leaves your facility and should remain safe as the customer is using it. About 50% of contamination is caused by the customer. So the product, even if it's for 1 month, the only case that you don't need any preservative is when you work under sterile condition and pack under sterile condition and have single dose products like those small eye drops that are 1 milliliter and you open them, use them, and you discard the rest. This is the only case like pharmaceuticals, like surgery products. Sorry.
Like, it got so animated.
So animated, exactly. Like surgery products. That is the only case when you have water containing product or a product that could be contaminated and you don't need any preservative. Otherwise, you need a preservative.
Yeah, I think that's the general message, definitely. And I know some shops such as Lush, they sell these very short shelf life facial masks, for instance, but they're in the fridge when you buy them and you have to put them in the fridge when you get home, and then they only really stay good for a week. So unless you have that sort of facility at your disposal, you are going to need a preservative.
I would add that sort of lawyers and solicitors, because Lush obviously can handle any lawsuit.
Yes, you don't want any lawsuit coming to your small artisan business because someone's got an eye infection from your product. It doesn't bear thinking about. So the last question we got from Emily was, does the use of charcoal require the use of preservatives? Well, I guess the answer depends on what else is in the formulation, but what do you have to say to that, Elham?
Exactly, it depends on where you are going to apply the charcoal. If it's a dry mask blend, then you don't need it. If it's a soap, you probably don't need it. But if it's a kind of cream, cleansing, emulsion, anything like that, water containing, specifically you need a preservative, and specifically you need a good preservative, because activated charcoal is actually absorbing, and it can absorb your preservative out of the product and deactivate it. So you need a very good challenge test, a very realistic challenge test, or several challenge tests at least, to find out which preservative or which preservative blend could preserve your product with charcoal and with activated charcoal specifically. Yeah.
Yes. In our new materials for our facial mask therapy certificate, which I know quite a few of you guys are doing, I've taken quite a few examples of masks on the market and highlighted how they're preserved, and it is quite eye-opening to look at the list of preservatives that a lot of these masks have, because initially you look at it and you think, oh, they only have 1 or 2 in it, but once you start to go through it, a lot of these masks have 6, 7, 8 different preservative compounds in there, and even then they even have a short shelf life even then, and a lot of them use parabens and phenoxyethanol and MIMIT and then all of the sort of more natural preservatives with it. So it just gives you an indication of how challenging it is to preserve clay and other mineral compounds. Okay, so moving on, we've got a question from Sarika here. She says, I've made an oil and water emulsion. I've added tea tree essential oil and lavender essential oil along with citric acid. Do I still need to add additional preservatives? If yes, can I use potassium sorbate? And what else would you recommend?
Well, you need certainly a preservative, because those essential oils, if they act as a preservative, the dosage should be so high that they may cause more harm than any good. They could be quite sensitizing. You need a preservative. Potassium sorbate is not a broad spectrum preservative, so you need to blend something with it. And I would recommend that you go to the list of the preservatives that we have provided with the course. You have a list of 21 preservatives. You can see which one work as a standalone, which one should be blended together, and at the end you have to find the suitable preservative with that certain emulsion with some test. It is nothing that I can recommend you out of the box and you can apply and it works. You have to find it out depending on all other ingredients in your product, and it needs several challenge tests. But you need a preservative or a preservative blend at least.
One question we get asked a lot is, what's your favorite preservative? And even I am guilty of asking Elham this question. And when I asked it of her, she just sort of looked at me as if to say, why are you asking me this? Because clearly it depends on the product and the ingredients that you use in it and how you formulate it and how you package it and the pH and everything, how your customer uses it. So there is no one size fits all preservative, unfortunately, and it takes a bit of detective work almost to figure out which ones to use. But hopefully with the table that you've got in your course, you can really sort of break it down one by one and figure out exactly what you can use, and also use that to find the preservative compounds available to you. Okay, so we've got another one here from Sarika. She says, would you recommend that after I have done all the testing, should I then still send my product to a lab for testing? So I'm guessing she means if I've done dip slide testing, should I then still send my product off to be challenge tested if it's not a legal requirement, which is what I'm guessing here.
If that is the question, even if it's not a legal requirement, it really gives you a peace of mind and comfort, and you have your test results. Even if GMP is not a requirement, you have your documentation of, and if someday something goes wrong, you have your documentation that your product was tested, that your raw material were tested, and everything was okay at the moment of test. So you have that, and you can prove that probably the customer has added some contamination to the product. It is reasonable to have at least one challenge test result for at least your prototypes or your first batch. It is very reasonable to have that, and depending on that result, then we can move on and go to the mass production. But at least for your first, I would say for your first 3 batches. But if you want to really be not waste too much money, or at the beginning you don't have that sum of money, at least for your first batch, real batch, it is reasonable to run a test. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I know it's easy to think, oh, well, it may not be the legal requirement where I am in the world, but it's going to give you so much knowledge and information about your product, and will give you so much comfort to know that your preservative system is actually working and is safe for use for your customer, that you should always go and send your product off for a challenge test, and make sure that you budget that in your entire business plan, in for the actual cost price for your product, all these tests that you have to do with it, also stability tests, of course. Okay, moving on, we've got some questions here from Nelly. And Nelly, I know you're on the call tonight, so let's dive straight into these. She says, is it possible to preserve dry matter water extraction? Now, I have to admit, I don't entirely understand the question. Elham, do you get that one?
No.
No. Nelly, if you want, type me a message in the Q&A box. I'm going to jump on to the next question, and let me know a little bit more about what you mean by dry matter water extraction, because I have to admit I'm not entirely sure. Okay, so emulsions, apparently in the transcript we talk about emulsions that are sensitive to electrolytes. Can you give us an example of that, Elham?
But basically, oil in water emulsions are all of them. They are sensitive to electrolytes. It means adding salt to an emulsion would break the emulsion. So it's the main difference between water in oil and oil in water emulsions. It means that there are some certain emulsifiers that have a kind of electrolyte tolerance. You can add around 10%. They are basically for products such as antiperspirants, because you have high concentration of salts in those products. But usually oil in water emulsions and emulsifiers have a low electrolyte tolerance. You can test it yourself. Make a kind of emulsion with Oliven, with another oil in water emulsifier, and add about 2% table salt to that. You can almost immediately the viscosity is reduced, and almost immediately the emulsion breaks in 2 phases, or in a couple of days at room temperature. That's what's
Yes.
meant by electrolyte intolerance.
Okay. If you guys go into the, I know quite a few of you are on the advanced diploma that we have as well. We've completely updated all the materials for module 2 now. So if you go in there on the sections on emulsification, there's a lot more information about using salt and water in oil emulsions. And there's quite a few study projects which are really cool and which get you to test some of these things out in your own lab. So get to grips with them, and then you'll see exactly what ELHAM means. Okay, Nellie's explained a bit more about what she means. Sorry, I'm brain dead after this huge upgrade. Nellie meant like tea, so dry water matter extraction. She was talking about infusing dried herbs in water. Is it possible to preserve those, ELHAM? And I know that you've talked about this before in the group. So I think a lot of sort of traditional cosmetic formulators might say, you know, you can't put herbal infusions in products, but can you?
It depends on the original condition of the hair. If you are really purchasing by a reliable supplier who provides you with the data sheet, and you know that the herbs are not contaminated, it is possible. We apply a kind of infusion instead of water phase, or we blend it with, or we make our own infusions for home use about 1 week, about 1 month, but add a preservative to it. The suitability and the efficacy of the preservative should be tested via challenge test, like always, but it is possible. It depends on the original quality of the herb. There are some herbs that you don't even know the origin, and the original count is quite high. Then it's quite clear that as soon as you add water to it, you have contamination. But if the original quality is all right and the count is low, then it is possible. Yes, but actually you need a good preservative system, because you have a good possibility of contamination. The more nutrients you have, the more possibility of contamination.
Yeah. And some suppliers will give you microbial count data when you buy powdered or dried herbs from them. So you then get a very good idea of what you're actually handling. And I know that that isn't always what you guys want, isn't what I would want either if I was designing my own skincare range, because I want to be able to grow my own herbs and go out and pick them. But I suppose if you want that actual data before you make your infusions, then it's very useful to have that. So you can always ask your supplier if they have that. Okay, hear from Nellie. She says she's talking about gem infused oils. That's something that I've heard quite a few people talk about in the last couple of months, actually. So infusing gemstones into oils. She asks, does this change preservation in the overall product? Now, I never made a gemstone infusion myself, or even bought one or seen one, but how does that affect preservation?
If that's in oil, the possibility of contamination is quite low. Once more, depending on the original quality of the gem. I have seen those oils. I have some somewhere here in the lab. So it depends on the on the contamination of the original stone. But you can, most of the gemstones, if they are big pieces, you can soak them in alcohol or water alcohol blend for a while, and then they are somehow disinfected. I know that people rinse them, probably even with dishwashing soap, and then either spray them with alcohol or soak them in alcohol. Then they are really almost disinfected or free of contamination. And then you have to dry it after you wash them, because you have to be sure that there is absolutely no water, and then you can add it to an oil. It is possible, and there are no cases of contamination. I have seen some. These are people who are working on gemstone therapy or such concepts, and it is possible. But you have to really clean the gemstone yourself at the beginning, and be sure that during cleansing there is absolutely no water entering to your oil. So clean it and dry it, and let it dry for at least a few hours in a oven, in a hot air oven, and then add it to your oil.
Okay, so when you're making gemstone infused oils, would you use a powder gemstones in there? Because if you're, I know that, for instance, the reason I ask this is for some clays, for instance, are irradiated. So I'm wondering if they would do the same thing with gemstone powders, for instance.
If it's powder, probably most of them should be radiated to so that the contamination is low. Most of them that are commercially available is fine powders, but as far as I know, these fine powders are actually added to lotions or peelings and not into oil infusions. I think if please correct me, Nelly, if I'm wrong, but I think these oil infusions are meant by really gemstones that you can see them, that the customer can see the gemstone, or at least a big piece, a big chunk is put into the oil, and then the oil is applied for lotion making or for an oil blend. But these are big chunks of gemstone. Those powders are being applied into either peeling or emulsions.
Okay. All right. So let's move on to the next one. We are getting some questions in already in the Q&A box. And guys, you know, we've had quite a few people join us. Come tell us where you are in the world. Come and have a chat with us, because this is a small classroom. You know, there are only about 15, 20 of us here. So it's not like one of our normal webinars where there are about, 600 people staring at me as I lose my presenter midway through the speech, as happened 2 weeks ago. Let's see, we've got a question here from Rose. She says, what are the main differences between conventional preservatives and natural ones? And she's asking specifically about the hazards to the individual and to the environment of the sort of conventional preservatives. And that's quite an interesting question, because we don't normally go around bashing synthetic ingredients. Formula Botanica's ethos has always very much been, let's focus on the positive rather than bash the negative. But what do you think are the risks associated with conventional preservatives, Elham? Give us your chemist's opinion.
Well, it depends where you are in the world, because conventional preservatives are different in different parts of the world. In the EU, we have a positive list. So a conventional preservative should be listed in that positive list. In the United States, for example, we have a negative list. So you can add anything except those ingredients that are in the negative list. So it depends on where you are located. But let's focus on Europe for the moment. In Europe, we have a positive list of preservatives, and these are ingredients that are being tested. And tests for preservatives are really tough and difficult, and that is the problem why we don't have any preservatives since decades on that list, specifically after the ban on animal testing, because nobody knows anything. How should they test a preservative? Because preservative should be, by definition, poison. Its job is to kill microorganisms, to kill cells. So it could be poisonous to consumer as well as to microorganisms. It depends on the dosage and how you are going to apply it. So from that aspect, it's a kind of poison, and no company in the world can have enough test evidences at the moment without testing on animals. So all companies are sitting there and having their hands closed and tied, and can do nothing, because they cannot supply, they cannot provide enough test material without any animal testing. So they are undergone enough testing. That is how they come into the list. And there are some bans or some limitations for certain ingredients, such as ascorbic acid, such as benzoic acid, such as salicylic acid. They belong to that list. And any product claiming to be preservative or adding to a cosmetic product as a preservative should have been listed in that list. Those are conventional preservatives. During time and with more exposure and with higher concentrations, as well as with improving testing facilities and testing instruments, there are results coming out that preservatives that we have used for decades, there are some results that they are sensitizing. One reason is that because we are exposed to more and more products, it's not just from cosmetics, we are exposed to them because of um, paints or even food or environmental smog or something like that. Those preservatives such as MIC and methyl isochlorothiazolinone, it's a very effective preservative, actually at 0.1%, really effective, but it's sensitizing because after the craze about parabens, almost all of the conventional manufacturers moved from parabens to MIT, MCI, MI because it's cheap and it's damn effective at low concentration. And then the exposure of the consumer to that preservative was so high that the sensitization cases are exploded. And even the EU is now talking about banning it for cosmetic at least. It is extremely applied in high units, not high concentration in indoor painting, for example. So it's not that only we are exposed to it as we put something on our skin. We are exposed to it as we are in a kind of room. Our whole body, our whole skin is exposed to it. So these are results that are coming through the time, that they are, some of them are being proved to be not quite environmental friendly or sensitizing. This is,
Yeah.
but these are definitely tested for a long period, for decades, till they are added to that listing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I suppose that's part of the reason that a lot of people are now starting to move towards natural and organic skincare, because they're reading all these stories about sensitization to synthetic preservatives. Since preservatives are the big topic, right? They're the one thing that everyone's most scared of. So I think in some respects, this move away from conventional preservatives is what's benefiting all of you guys in starting your own businesses, because as we know, the industry is exploding. Okay, so we've got one more question from Rose, and then we're going to go to the questions that we've had live already on the call. And keep them coming, guys. There's quite a few here already, so that's fantastic. We'll be coming to you in a minute. Let's see. Rose says, can you make something like magnesium butter using water, but no preservatives if the water content is below 0.6%? Does that make it self-preserving, and what shelf life would you give that? So that's quite a complicated one. I'm going to pass that one over to you, Elham.
Frankly, I didn't quite understand the question. I should just mention one thing, that the water content lower than 0.6% doesn't mean that the water activity is lower than 0.6%. These are two different things. So if you want to have a self-preserving product, first you have to measure the water activity, not just assuming that there's the water content is lower than 0.6, and be sure that that there is no chance that the consumer adds water. Lowering water activity does not kill the microorganisms. It only stops their growth. So as soon as you add some water to the system, it's like noodles. Noodles have low water activity, but you cannot keep noodles in water for a long time without any preservative. It's the best example. The kind of growth would happen as soon as you have enough water in the system. So you need to have a preservative. But about the rest, I'm not quite sure what it's meant by adding magnesium sulfate to a butter. What is the purpose of adding an electrolyte to a butter? I know that magnesium sulfate is added to bath salts, for example, because it's a kind of muscle relief. But what is the purpose of adding it to? I'm not quite sure about the rest of the question.
I don't know. Okay, well, Rose, if you watch the replay, feel free to drop us a line in the online classroom, or just ping us a message, and maybe we can chat a bit more about it. But we're not entirely sure at the moment, so a little bit more explanation would be very helpful. Thank you, and thank you for submitting your questions. Okay, so we've come to the end of all the questions that we received up front. Wow, we're already 40 minutes in. I wasn't expecting that. So let me jump to the questions now that we've received on the call, and we've got one here from Jane in Canada. Hi, Jane. She says, honeysuckle extract is showing up more and more in organic and natural skincare suppliers. There is consideration that they are using this ingredient as a preservative. And we discussed in another group recently that the honeysuckle extract naturally produces or mimics parabens. What are your thoughts on this extract? Because I don't think we've included that one in the list of 21, have we? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I don't think, because it's actually more, there are many safety assessors in Europe that don't recognize it at all as a preservative. They don't accept your file if you have only honeysuckle extract. So it's no preservative as a standalone. So you have to blend it with something else, at least with another. You have to blend it in a system. It is used in many natural products. I have seen it as well, but I don't think that it's as a standalone. It should be blended with other preservatives. And in Europe specifically, it is not acknowledged as a preservative. So your safety assessor would have an objection if you rely basically only on honeysuckle extract.
The other thing I would say is that a lot of consumers are very savvy about this now, and I'm seeing quite a few sort of explosive arguments about honeysuckle extract amongst the green blogger community as well. So they're trying to educate all of their followers about why they shouldn't use it. So just keep that in mind if you do intend to go down that route. A, you might have a problem if you intended to sell your products worldwide because certain regulatory bodies or safety assessors wouldn't permit it, and B, you might get the consumers sort of bashing you over the head with a big stick as well. So we've got another one here from Jane. She says, if your ingredients from the supplier have had a preservative added to them already, such as a hydrosol, are you required to add an additional preservative to your ingredients if the remaining ingredients in your product are anhydrous? So she's speaking specifically of a biphase cleanser here. So imagine you've got 50% oil, you've got 50% hydrosol, you're blending them together, your hydrosol is pre-preserved. Would you need to add another preservative to the overall product?
You have to test the product. It really depends if depends on the preservative used in that hydrosol, imaginary hydrosol, because if it's the preservative that is completely migrates to the oil phase, then your water phase remains unpreserved. That is a main issue with preservatives, that they have more oil soluble components, and the preservative might migrate to the oil phase. Or if you have some extracts, some infusions in your oil phase, that might deactivate the preservative. The best way to find it out is to run at least one challenge test. There is no ready-made answer for that. If you have you make a, let's say, make a blend by 90% hydrosol and adding, let's say, some dried extract that they are either irradiated or they have a very low count, then it's possible that you don't need to add any other preservative. But in any other case, you have to test it.
Okay. All right. Let me get to the next question. Here's one from Shelley Ann in the USA. She says, when adding macerated oils, which are either oils that she's bought or made in her lab, to her emulsion, should she be concerned about any microbial activity in the macerated oil that could contaminate the emulsions? And should the macerates then undergo microbial testing? Good question.
You should be concerned as soon as your macerated oil comes into contact with water as an emulsion. Yes, you should be concerned, because herbs, they have some contamination with them unless they are radiated. If they are radiated, then they are sterilized. Otherwise, they have some contaminants. Usually, if they are prepared properly or dried properly, the number of contaminants or the TDC is very low, and your oil is free of contaminants, and there is no matter when you add it to the blend it with water. But if you have herbs that, I don't know, you have dragged some roots out of the earth, and without cleaning them, you have macerated it. As long as it's only oil, you have no contamination. But as soon as it comes in contact to water, then you have to be concerned about it. That is a problem we can see. We have had some cases, I think, even some photos that we have posted in the Facebook group. Oil maceration when the herb was not quite dried, or somehow a few drops of water were added to the oil. You couldn't see the water drops at all, but you could see a some kind of strains of mold that were growing in the oil. So you should be concerned, certainly.
Would you test the macerated oils then?
No, I test the finished product.
Okay. All right. Okay, here's let's see. Guys, can you please type your questions in the Q&A box, because you're making me multitask here. If you're still awake, can you put your hand up as well, because it's great to know that you're still out there. We've got a question here from Jane. She says, this is very topical. We had this question today in the Facebook group as well. After you've made your product, can you place it in the freezer to inhibit any type of bacteria?
You can certainly inhibit some types of bacteria, not all of them, but you are compromising the stability of your product. It depends on which product you have and which packaging you have. Actually, freezing, as Lorraine has mentioned today in the Facebook group, freezing is a kind of shock testing the stability of your product. So it's what you are going to observe in a real time at room temperature for 2 years. You can observe in 5 days in the freezer. So you are really shaking and shocking your product. So you may prohibit bacterial growth, but you are compromising the stability of the product, specifically if you have water in the product, or many packaging material wouldn't withstand the freezer at all. So it's if you have dried powders, probably, or clays, that might be suitable, but it depends on the powder. Then you are probably decaying the active ingredients in the powder. So it's not really the best way.
Yeah. Interesting question, though, and very topical. I don't know why everyone was suddenly thinking about the freezer today, but
probably it appeared somewhere in a blog. I assume some blogger has made a recommendation. Probably.
I don't know. Well, I mean, it makes sense, because you can sort of see that, like Lush, as I said earlier, with their face masks, you keep them in the fridge, so you sort of think, well, that really slows down any microbial growth. But of course, you've got to effectively keep your products at the temperature, at room temperature, the temperature they're going to be applied at. Okay, I've got 3 questions left, guys, and you've got us here for another 45 minutes. So if you want to hear any more answers from us, please keep those questions coming. Another one from Shelley Ann. She says, what are the benefits of airless packaging in terms of preservation? If you put a preserved oil and water emulsion that passed microbial testing into the packaging, will no new microbial growth due to the fact that the product is airless? Will there be, sorry, start again, Lorraine. Okay, so if you put a preserved oil and water emulsion into packaging, it's already passed microbial testing. Will there be no new microbial growth because the product is airless, the packaging is airless, and because the customers cannot touch the product? Did that make sense?
Well, that's airless packaging almost deletes the consumer effect in the contamination. We have mentioned that almost 50% of contamination is caused by the consumer. One part is that you prepare under hygienic conditions, and all your raw material are hygienic and are free of contaminants, and your product is free of contaminants. Your packaging line, your packaging material, everything is free of contaminant. This is half of the way. The other half is caused by the consumer. And airless packaging actually deletes that part. First, there is no air coming into the product, so it's one contamination is caused by the headspace of the product, meaning If you have a 50 milliliter of product and you consume half of it, you have 25 milliliter of air in contact with your product. If you have 100 milliliter of product and you consume half of it, you have 50 milliliters of air in contact with the product. So it's the head space that plays a role in contamination as well. So that factor is deleted, and the factor of the consumer adding contamination to the product is, but it doesn't delete the need of preservation. Exactly. You have to make sure that your product is safe and is free of contaminants and even challenge tests. And then in airless packaging, you have those two factors, air, headspace and consumer, almost deleted.
Okay. All right. So we have a question here from Erica. She says, I see a lot of people making room sprays with only water and essential oils. There's a thought. I believe they need a preservative, but I see many out on the market without one. Would the addition of alcohol be enough? And if so, which alcohol would you use?
Well, frankly, adding water and essential oil, you have your essential oil on top of the water. Uh, Keeping in mind that those products are most of the time they are sprays, so you don't have any fingers dipping into the product or any little air coming into the product. So the main part of contaminant that is caused by the consumer is deleted that way. But it really doesn't work because you have your essential oil on top of the water. You have to shake it each time. So and for room sprays, you don't have that kind of concerns like a product come into contact with skin, a topical product. So that is the main difference. I would suggest that the preservative should be added to those products, such as I have seen so many yoga mat sprays that in DIY blogs that they blend tea tree oil and water, but you certainly need a preservative. You can add alcohol by at the ethanol at a concentration of at least 15%, then your products don't need a challenge test. So at about 15%, 20% alcohol, then you don't need, probably you don't need any preservative, but certainly you have to test it for the need of any preservative. But alcohol, you can add ethanol. Isopropyl alcohol, if you want to be natural, then ethanol or vodka are the best solutions. Isopropyl alcohol has a kind of inherent scent that can interact with your essential oils. It's probably cheaper, it's not natural, and it has a kind of scent that can affect the product. So ethanol or denatured alcohol are those that are applied in perfumery.
Yeah. I suppose, of course, if you're spraying your room spray around on your linen, for instance, you'd want it to be preserved, because imagine spraying microbes all over your pillow before you go to sleep. It doesn't sound very appealing.
If it's for linen, if it's for furniture, then certainly it should be preserved.
Yeah. Okay. So don't just believe that you read on the blogs, I guess, is the takeaway story there. Is another question from Nelly. She's asking about irradiated matter, and it's a good question. Will it still have any benefits for the products after it's been irradiated? And I think that's probably a concern that many organic formulators have, because they want to use these products because they have so many beneficial properties. So then you irradiate them. Are those properties still there?
Most of the properties are still there. Most of the active ingredients are still there, but radiation is not accepted by EcoCert. So you have to consider this if you are going to have your products certified. It is a good way, a reasonable way to preserve some tricky raw materials, such as clays, such as some gums. It is really a achievable, rather affordable way, and it's frankly it's better than spraying the gum with a kind of chemical preservative, because your gum remains preserved for at least 2 years. But it's it's a personal. It depends on your product concept, on your personal preferences. There are people who don't heat the food in the microwave. It's a kind of personal preference, but you have to consider it if you are going to be certified, because uh, radiation is not accepted by many certifying bodies. But but
So,
if you are if you have preserved a clay, a herb, radiated, a clay, a herb, or a gum, then the good stuff is still there.
so what is the main reason that these certifying bodies won't accept irradiated ingredients? What do they give as the main reason?
But frankly, I don't quite know. It's a kind of manipulation. It's rather kind of um, authority having their saying, because they till a couple of years ago, the ethylene oxide wasn't accepted at all, and then about 4 or 5 years ago, they certified an ethylene oxide unit in India. I think it was not ethylene oxide uh, gained from from earth oil. It was ethylene oxide prepared from plant material, and they actually originally they certified it, and we were all concerned that soon all PEG material would be natural and certified. And then there was so many protests around the industry that they called back that certification. So I think basically it's a kind of having your power and having your saying. I
Yeah.
personally don't have any great objection against radiation. This is something that they do on surgery material, on surgery room ingredients, on pharmaceuticals, and it's having more benefits than harms. But it's my preference.
Okay. Just an interesting question that popped up into my mind. Okay, we've got a few more questions that have come in, and this one's right on topic from Jane. She says, what is it about clays that have the ability to create problems in your products? I mean, are they contaminated to begin with? I know that you touched on this a bit earlier with the absorbency, but what is the problem with clay?
Well, the first material is they are coming from they are natural. They are being digged from the earth, or from some rocks or some mounds, and they have contaminants in them if they are not radiated or somehow cleaned. Hot air or steamed and then dried, or the best way is actually radiation. So they have a kind of contamination with them. The second point is that they are absorbent, and they can absorb your preservative. They soak your preservative and then leave the product. If you have some water in the product, they leave the product without the preservative, or deplete the product from the preservative. So you need really some tough challenge tests, some realistic challenge tests, to see if your preservative system can preserve the clay. And it's unfortunately till now, I think the most effective one, somehow half natural, half accepted by natural, is phenoxyethanol. Uh, those mild natural preservatives, they are ineffective against clay as soon as you have water in the system. As long as you have clay somewhere on the shelf without any water, nothing happens. But they have some spores if they are not radiated, and those spores can grow immediately as soon as there is water.
Yeah. Which is a real shame, because clays are amazing, and as I'm sure many of you have worked with clays before, you'll know how incredibly popular they are as well. So it's a real challenge that we, as the natural and organic skincare community, face, because we all want to work with them, but they're really hard to preserve. Okay, another question from Jane. She says, can you use liquor in your ingredients? Now, I'm presuming you mean ethanol, alcohol, vodka, and if so, do you treat it as a food ingredient? Do you need a preservative? Now, Jane, I'm not entirely sure what you understand as liquor, because we don't really have anything called liquors. So I suppose that would encompass all alcoholic beverages here in the UK.
I think we have liquor in Germany. Though those they are either cacao liquor or caramel liquor. That's a kind of such as Baileys. Probably you are meaning. Are we right, Jane?
Well, there's a bit of a delay. There's a delay between us and the viewers, so we'll find out in a minute. But I mean, basically, you've often talked about using vodka in certainly in cleaning the lab, and we know that you can use vodka to make tinctures. But would you use other types of alcohol anywhere else in your products?
Rum, brandy. Well, they are distilled products. Okay, they are distilled. They are distilled products. The alcohol concentration is high, so it's actually kind of disinfectant. But it's too pity to disinfect with rum, I think. But the alcohol content is quite high. You don't have any contamination issue. But if you are talking about an emulsion, most emulsifiers have low alcohol tolerance, or gums have limited alcohol tolerance. So that is something that you have to test the stability of your product, and it depends, of course, on the concentration. If you're going, because tinctures are applied around 1%, 0.5% to, I would say, maximum 5% in an emulsion. It depends on the concentration you are talking about, but it can compensate the stability of your emulsion. So you have to test for the stability. Emulsions, gums, these have limited alcohol tolerance, but from a contamination point of view, there is no problem.
Jane's talking about body scrubs. Apparently, she says in the chat box, which is an interesting concept. I like the idea of a sort of a tropical rum coconut body scrub.
Well, that's quite fascinating. That's really tempting. I feel my skin. That's quite fascinating. But it depends then on the scrub and the exfoliant you are going to apply. So at least one challenge test should be applied. It depends what you are using on your as your exfoliant. It should have a low TVC, and you need at least one challenge test. But it's quite fascinating concept.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Let's see. Yes. Okay. There's 2 more questions here, guys. So you've got us here for, we're scheduled for another half hour, but if we run out of questions, then obviously we'll end early. So keep them coming. Here's a question from Alexia. Now she's looking for a blend of preservatives that that she wants to work with a gelling agent that isn't compatible with benzyl alcohol and phenoxyethanol, or blends that contain those compounds. So she's asking if there is a ready-made blend of preservative that contains phenethyl alcohol, sodium benzoate, and potassium sorbate. Now, I don't know off the top of my head, and I'm sure Elhan doesn't know all trade combos off.
I'm not quite sure. I know that Schulke has phenethyl alcohol in some of their preservatives. Maybe they have this brand, but I'm not quite sure. Frankly, I don't have all preservatives in my memory. Probably Schulke may have something like that.
Okay, I've just typed Schulke in the chat box, so you can always look them up. Elham has recommended them before in some of our webinars, because they also, I think they're the ones who do the dip slides and who you get some of your petri dishes from, don't you? So they're a good one to check out, because they've got an amazing website with all sorts of equipment on there. Okay, I'm coming to the last question, guys. So you're running out of time here. You've got to keep us going if you want to keep us here for another 27 minutes. Here's one from Gloria. She says, if you preserve a hydrosol after you've purchased it, will that be effective, or is it not worth it?
Hi, Gloria. It depends on the original status of the hydrosol. If the hydrosol is not preserved, then it should be packaged or pasteurized and packaged into disinfected bottles. I know from my own country, there are huge productions of rose water, and mainly we apply rose water in beverages and food. And less for skincare. So those products are not preserved. Other hydrosols are applied by herbalists or for stomach ache, for digestion, and they are not preserved, but they are bottled in pasteurized and bottled in disinfected bottles. So as soon as you open the bottle, you have a couple of weeks time, and you have to keep the bottle. There are small bottles, and you have to keep the bottle in the refrigerator, and you have a couple of weeks maximum, a couple of weeks time to consume the hydrosol. If your hydrosol is bottled in pasteurized and bottled in disinfected bottles, then as you open it, you can add a preservative to it. If your supplier has purchased big drums and then bottles themselves somewhere in a kind of backyard without applying any preservative, then as you receive the hydrosol, it's probably already contaminated, and there is no use to add or there's little use to add the preservative to that hydrosol. So you have to check with your supplier what is the original status of the of the hydrosol.
Okay, we've got another question. Thank you for keeping us going, Jane. Come on, guys, I can see loads of you. I think there's about 30 people on the call. We need to hear more from you. Talk to us. We're here, you know. So let us know what you think. Here's a great question from Jane. She says, I'm frustrated at seeing organic and natural skincare companies that do not show on the label, particularly in emulsions. I agree with you, Jane. That really annoys me. She says, how as a community can we do something to improve this deception of either hiding the product's full exposure? I mean, it's so true, particularly outside of the EU, I have to say. I mean, the problem we have when we do see that type of product here in the EU is often when these products are exported or imported into the EU, I should say, and then they don't adhere to the regulations. And I was at the Professional Beauty Show in London a couple of weeks ago. I was giving a talk, and I was talking to a supplier of high performance cosmetics here, who here in the UK. And he was saying that they have all their products made in the US, and he said that they constantly see particularly US-based companies who completely flaunt the legislation and just don't label their products properly, because full disclosure on labels is a legal requirement everywhere. I mean, it's not like you can sort of get around it. The only problem is that it's enforced less in certain countries. So yes, I'm also frustrated, because one of the main questions that we've had in our online classrooms for the last 2 years is, I've seen this product here, how is it preserved? There's no preservative on the label. And 9 out of 10 times we end up saying, well, there probably is one in there, but they're just not telling us about it. So yes, it's not good. And what do you think, Elham?
But it drives me nuts. I wrote a company last week. Exactly, the mother company is an American company, and they are selling decorative cosmetics here in Germany with huge propaganda and YouTube videos and Facebook advertisements. And they have, I think, about 60,000 Facebook fans. So you can imagine how exactly. And I've had a look at the ingredients: peach powder, banana powder, raspberry powder in a color cosmetic. And I know from experience that you cannot color the skin with those powders. They might color the product itself, but you cannot color the skin in a color cosmetic. There must be something else. I wrote to them, those are fanciful names. What is the real ingredients list of your products? And they sent to me exactly the same crap that was on the homepage. Till now, no chance to get the real name of the ingredients. And the legislators or the controllers are so out of personnel, or have no, they don't interact unless really something seriously has happened, a kind of claim, a kind of injury, a kind of contamination, then they intervene and interact. Otherwise, as long as you are not exposed, you can do whatever you want. It really drives me nuts as well, because it's unfair to others who are making a kind of honest business, a real business, and they keep to the legislation. Well, I hope
Yep.
you can inform your customer via your blogs, your Facebook fan page, in LinkedIn. I I I cry everywhere. I shout everywhere I can, from every roof I can. I write quite explosive LinkedIn posts because it drives me really nuts. But we have to keep going and keep calling and keep shouting. Maybe we can inform the consumer.
Yeah, no, and Elham does write explosive LinkedIn posts. I've read them. Thankfully, she doesn't share them quite so much on Facebook. But no, it's true. I think a lot of companies, larger companies out there, are being quite deceptive about their labeling. I mean, for instance, for the updates on the new materials on our new e-learning platform, I wrote to a very large UK-based company trying to find out what was in one of their very well-known masks, which retails for about £300. I thought, what are they preserving this thing with? And there's no preservative on the label. And I had to write to their help desk about 3 times, and I phoned them, and no one could tell me. And I just don't think even the PR team and people at the front of house are told these things either. Just someone in the back office has decided not to disclose this information. So yes, it is a problem. But you guys should be proud of the fact that you're selling stable, well-preserved products which are safe for your customers and which use, exquisite ingredients, because you're choosing fantastic natural and organic ingredients to put in your products. So be proud of that, and try and educate your customer about the fact that you're preserving them to protect them, because ultimately it's for them, right? And for you, obviously, but you want your customer to be safe as they're using your product. Okay, one more question's coming from Jane. Thank you, Jane. Said that I asked my hydrosol supplier if I can remove their original label and replace it with mine. And she wanted to do this to reduce contamination, potentially transferring the hydrosol that she bought into the new bottle to then sell it, presumably as like a hydrosol toner or something like that. And they said they had to check with their lawyers, which is rather annoying because you obviously found a really nice solution there. I mean, I've not heard of that before, but I can imagine that they're probably saying, well, you'd almost be selling our product with your own label, so then it becomes almost sort of like white labeling. So I can see why they would say something like that. I mean, do you have any suggestions on that, Elham?
It's quite odd to me, really, because when you put your label on it, you are the supplier or manufacturer, and you are the responsive person for that product. So it's not their product anymore. It's quite odd to me. We don't have this problem here, at least with a couple of suppliers that I know. You can put your label on it, and then it's your product, and you are responsible for the product. But I would really at least test the product and be sure that I'm selling a good product and at least not contaminated, because then you are the responsible person for that product as soon as you have your own label on that.
Oh, Jane said they did allow it. Oh, that's good. Okay. All right. Well, that's great news, Jane. I'm glad that they did allow it.
Oh,
clever
great.
idea. Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. So here's another question from Erica. She says, I buy magnesium oil and I called the supplier to check about the preservative. They told me there was no preservative as there was no water. They said that the oil is made by leaving the flakes out, so over time that they create some oil with humidity. Would this be safe?
But I'm not quite sure about magnesium oil. It's quite ingredient product. Magnesium is effective as an electrolyte and salt, and it's effective as it comes into contact with water. I have read some fanciful descriptions about magnesium oil, that they soak the oil with magnesium and then sell the oil. But magnesium in oil, it's not as an electrolyte. It's a kind of bulk material, and it magnesium salts could absorb water. So if the salt absorbs water into the oil, it could become contaminated. But as long as there is no water in the product, there is no contamination. But the scene of magnesium, the sense of magnesium oil, I'm not sure what it is, because as long as there is no water, there is no magnesium salts and it's magnesium ions, and the product is almost useless.
Okay.
But as long as there is no water, from the contamination point of view, as long as there is no water, there's no contamination.
Yeah. Okay, well, this comes down to what we say in a lot of our courses, you know, check the solubility of the ingredient, because often it may not have any purpose. For instance, green tea oil won't really bring the catechins that you want into your product because they're not oil soluble. Caffeine isn't oil soluble, so putting it in an anhydrous cellulite scrub won't necessarily do what you want it to do. Okay, let's see. We had one more from Jane in, which is more veering into the stability testing certificate, but we'll let that one off. She says, I know you aren't a fan of borax. Again, very topical since we've been talking about this today, which has been used for years in natural skincare. If it's a cosmetic type of borax, would you see any problem with this?
Yes. Borax has been used for decades. It's true for it's from past my grandmother time, and it has been specifically used by herbalists because it's easy to work with and it's cheap and it's affordable. Borax is a kind of household cleanser, household ingredient, so it was affordable everywhere in every village. Before internet era, where people could order their raw material everywhere around the world and have their raw material in 1 week or 2 weeks. Borax were affordable and achievable everywhere, and there are still herbalists that use it, and there are still herbalists that claim beeswax is an emulsifier, which is not an emulsifier. Borax has some limitations around the world. It is very sensitizing to infant skin and to injured skin, and the majority of your consumers and your customers have a compromised skin. They are either under chemotherapy, they are suffering under diabetes, they have a sensitive skin, they are using some medication and they have a sensitive or injured skin. They come to you because they have, some of them are basically naturalists, but most of them are suffering under dermatitis, eczema, or some other skin problems. And borax is really very sensitizing to that kind of skin, and it's under limitation almost everywhere around the world, and even completely prohibited in some parts of the world, like Japan, for example. It's not allowed at all. In other parts of the world, it's limited. Not for, you have to strictly mention not for infants, not for children, not for sensitive or injured skin on your product, and it doesn't belong to modern and scientific skincare product. It was for my grandmother's time, where there were no other ingredients available. Please keep your hands from borax.
If you're on the advanced diploma, there are in module 2, which is my favorite module now out of all the courses that we have because it's so exciting. Have a look at the emulsification sections and also the surfactant sections, because they really help you understand what an emulsifier or a surfactant looks like and how it works, and then you'll see what borax is and what borax isn't. So yes, that's obviously good advice from Elham. Right, one more question from Jane. If you're wanting to make baby care products, what would be the safest way to go around this? And I mean, we've talked about baby care a lot. Obviously, it's one of the biggest growing sectors in the global personal care market. I personally struggle with it a little bit because most babies don't really need any products on their skins, and they're so perfect and little. But some babies obviously have compromised skin, and then, you know, their parents do want to put something on there. Plus, you've got things like nappy rash and cradle cap, and you know, all the usual cleaning bottoms. I know it all too well myself. So, I mean, what's the best way to go around this? Anhydrous products? What do you think, Elham?
I would really suggest anhydrous product, and I would really suggest as basic, as natural as possible. We are in natural skincare school, but really they are 50 shades of natural. So as natural as possible, as basic and simple as possible. don't use fanciful ingredients with fanciful names. Keep to 2, 3 oils maximum or butters and apply them correctly or blend them correctly and then offer them to your it is really I have no children myself, so I cannot talk for a mother. What I would put on my baby's popo if it was red and inflamed, I don't know, because I have no children myself. But it's something, as an entrepreneur, the whole world is winning from baby products, and it's a good right to have their baby products. We don't teach it because we don't believe in, or we don't recommend it, but it's a huge market, as you have mentioned, and people want to have some, at least a part of this pie, a share of this pie.
Yeah.
But keep it as simple as possible, as natural as possible, as basic as possible. No fanciful ingredients, no EOs, no soap. I get mad when people in a soap forum talk about soap has an alkaline pH. Soap cannot be suitable for baby, and as people recommend their olive oil soap or coconut soap for babies. No soap, oil, a kind of cleansing oil, a kind of balm for against nappy rash product, or a kind of mild massage oil that absorbs rapidly into the skin. So keep to those products. You don't really need any shampoo with surfactants. You don't need any soap. You don't need any product that is preserved. I am mama preservative myself. I'm not intimidated by preservatives, but baby skin really doesn't need any preservative. It's about the exposure. And keep in mind that about the limitations of concentrations and legislations. In Europe, products for babies under 3 years, they should be assessed separately. It's completely another story about the dosage of the ingredients, limitations of the ingredients, labeling, and safety assessment. So keep
Okay.
all that in mind before you dive into the market.
Yep. But it is a huge market. It's absolutely massive. So I totally understand why people want to get into it. Maybe we will do something with baby care and mother care and maybe older children in the future. But we'll have to talk that one through with all of us. Okay, another question from Shelley Ann. She says, I currently use Dermasoft 1388, which is sodium levulinate or levulinic acid, anisic acid, glycerin, and something else, water?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I think, well remembered, Lorraine. Don't know if you can see the bags under my eyes from getting on a new e-learning platform live. She uses that and elderberry extract in her products for people with sensitive skin. Will repeat use of this preservative lead to sensitization like some of the other preservatives that we've seen on the market? What do you think, Elham?
Well, it depends on what you mean repetitive use. What is the dosage? It's actually a nice preservative, but it's no standalone preservative. I cannot imagine that it works with elderberry extract. It's weak on fungi, and you need to add some antifungal ingredient to it. Everything could be sensitizing, but this is one of the mildest available on the market at the moment, but it has a higher concentration compared to other mild preservatives. That should be kept in mind. It has around at least 2.53%, and it should be blended with at least one other ingredient to have a broad spectrum.
Yes, I know that Dr. Strautmans, who make the preservative, they recommend that you use Dermasoft. Was it GCMY?
Exactly.
Glycerol caprylate with it?
Exactly, yeah. Glycerol caprylate, or you can blend it with one of oxyls, or with sorbic acid, or with the sorbic acid containing preservative. You have to blend it. Well, these are problems with these modern new preservatives. The old-fashioned preservatives have been on the market for decades, and now we observe the sensitization. This is something that probably would come out after 5 years, after 10 years. These are new preservatives on the market, and the exposure is not that much yet. So at the moment, the cases of, I haven't seen any cases of sensitization, frankly.
Because these compounds, these preservatives also don't contain any fragrance allergens or compounds, do they? I mean, like we saw in the new materials we put in the advanced diploma, this is one of the only preservatives that we covered that didn't contain benzyl alcohol, for instance, which is so popular in natural preservatives. So hopefully it won't lead to sensitization because of that. But as Elham says, yeah, only time will tell. We're seeing Dermasoft 138888 Eco certainly used a lot more now in natural skincare. Okay, guys, we've come to the end of the questions and almost to the end of our hour and a half, which is brilliant. I wasn't expecting us to get that many questions. So I'm pleased. So I suggest that we end here. Thank you very much for attending. And I hope that you're all enjoying the new e-learning platform, because I'm so excited that with all the feedback that we've had from you, I really hope that you like it, because we worked so very hard to get it live. I'm certainly very proud of it, so I hope that you're enjoying it. There will be a replay. I'm going to put it into your course materials hopefully tomorrow. It should be available in the next hour already. So if I'm still awake, I'll put it in there. But otherwise, tomorrow it will definitely be in there. The transcript will go out in the coming weeks as well. So please be patient with us, because it takes a surprisingly long time to type up 1.5 hours worth of talking. So just bear with us, and we'll put that into the existing Q&A transcript. So that will be nicely filed with all the new questions that we've received. And if you're on the certificate in cosmetic stability testing, we're doing a live webinar for that one next week, same time, same day, same place. So I hope that you'll join us for that one too, because it will be the first one that we're running for that particular course. And if you have already signed up for that course, make sure that you go through it, because it is absolutely fantastic. I think it is actually one of the best courses that we have. So I hope that you'll enroll for it if you haven't already, because everyone needs to know about stability testing. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. Oh, I've seen a few messages here. Thank you, guys. Really appreciate the fact that you've joined us. I'm just going to hand over to Elham to say goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. It was really nice to have you here, and really nice to have your questions. They were really interesting and not repetitive like last question. They were really exciting and challenging, and I hope you have enjoyed it and have the answer to some of your questions at least. And keep practicing, keep experimenting. There is no way around it. That the best way to find out the efficacy of your preservative is testing, testing, testing. So
yes,
happy testing and have a good time.
Yes, indeed. And yes, we'll hopefully see you all in the classroom online. And yes, we'll be in touch soon. So thank you very much for joining us. And if you're on the stability testing course, we'll see you there next week. Thanks, guys. Bye.